Visual Studio Code is my favorite code editor to build all sorts of applications, and that is because it is free, it is very lightweight, you can use it in Windows, macOS, or Linux, and it is really, really fast. So today I want to show you how you can start building your C# applications using Visual Studio Code. To get started, you're going to need to install two things in your box. And let me show you this page very quickly. The first thing you want to install is the .NET SDK or Software Development Kit. So the SDK is what includes every single piece of tooling that you're going to need to build, run, and test your .NET and C# applications, right? And to get to this page, all you have to do is just go to .NET/download. And this is going to offer you the latest version of the .NET SDK, which at the time that I'm recording this is version 8.0. It could be different for you. And it's also going to offer the version for your OS, right? In my case, that's Windows, .NET SDK x64, but it may be different depending on the OS that you're running, right? And so I already have this installed. I'm not going to start it again, but the installation process is really fast. So that's very simple. And then the other thing is, of course, Visual Studio Code, right? You can get Visual Studio Code at code.visualstudio.com. And then all you have to do is just click one of these two buttons, and that's going to take you into the download and installation super fast, which is one of the things that what I like Visual Studio Code. You should be ready with Visual Studio Code open in just seconds, right? And so yeah, that's where you need to get started. And then you're going to land, of course, in the main UI of Visual Studio Code. So let me start by walking you through this UI very quickly, right? So from the left side, the first thing you're going to notice is that we have this section here, which is known as the activity bar. So the activity bar is the one that is going to take you into different sidebars of Visual Studio Code. So if I click, for instance, on this one here, the Explorer, that's going to open the Explorer sidebar, right? Where we're going to see a bunch of files in a moment. But there's also this search section over here to search across files. We have integrated source control also in Visual Studio Code. We have a view for running and debugging, and also we have the extensions view over here, right? Now let me close that for a moment. Now, of course, in the center over here, we have the main section where we're going to be working in our code, right? And we're going to take a look at that in a moment. At the top, we also have our menus, our menu bar with a bunch of menu options. And then at the bottom, and let me open that by doing, you can either do view terminal, right here. So that's going to open the bottom panel over here. Or you can also use shortcuts. I mean, it's a good thing to start learning shortcuts for Visual Studio Code because you can do everything here using shortcuts. So for instance, to open and close the terminal, you can either do Control tilde, like I'm doing right now, Control tilde, or you can do Control J, which is my favorite shortcut to open and close that terminal, right? Now, since we have the terminal open over here, one thing that you should do right away is to verify that your .NET installation has completed successfully, right? And to do that, all you have to do is just type .NET -- version, for instance, and that should pop up right away the version that you're using of .NET. As you can see right now, 8.0.100, that's the one that I have installed. So that confirms that .NET has been installed properly. If you wanted to, you can also do .NET -- info, and that's going to give you even more information about everything related to .NET that you have installed in your box. But yeah, .NET is ready, so that's good, right? Now, the next thing, before we start actually creating applications, is that I want to show you a few small customizations that I like to do in Visual Studio Code, just so that the experience is a little bit better, right? And so what you want to do is go into the settings of Visual Studio Code, which you can go to by going into File, and you can do Preferences, and then you can do Settings over here. And so let me show you a few of the settings that I usually change here. The first one is going to be this one called, and you can just type here, place open brace, like this. So this is going to show up a few options, and the ones that I like to enable are these two ones over here. Let me show you these two ones over here. So place open brace on new line for control blocks. So this is so that the open brace opens just after your if else or switch. It just opens after that, so it renders nicely there. And also the other one, place open brace on new line for functions, is so that when you open a function block, also it throws the open brace on the next line, right? So just some customizations that I like. You don't have to use them, but I find that very useful. So that's the first one. The next one is going to be format on save. So it's going to be this one over here, right there. And I like this one because that means that anytime I save a file, it automatically gets formatted, right? So that it gives you a good shape right away. We don't even have to do all this formatting manually, right? And so that's the second one. And the last one is this one. If you go into File, and then into autosave, this one over here, which I already have it ticked. That's going to make it so that anytime you go ahead and write some code, just after a second, it's going to immediately save the file, right? So that way you're never risk losing any of your code as you're writing it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and close this and close that. And so, but how do we actually get started creating C# projects in Visual Studio Code? So for that, what you want to do is start taking advantage of extensions. There's a massive set of extensions available for Visual Studio Code that adds all sorts of improvements into the VS Code experience. And the one that you absolutely want to install here is the one that's called the C# Dev Kit. So I'm going to just type here C# Dev Kit. All right, so that should show up right here. So it is this very first one over there, Dev Kit, right, which is by Microsoft, right? And this is the one that not only enables the C# features in Visual Studio Code, but also adds a bunch of improvements into the overall experience in Visual Studio Code so that you can manage your C# projects in a much better way, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just click on install. And this extension is, by the way, not going to install just one extension. It's going to install a few extensions, like the C# extension and a couple others. So it's kind of a pack of extensions, and it should just take a few seconds to get installed. Okay, so it is installed now. So let me show you, if I just clear this, let me show you what got installed. So if I open this section here, what you're going to see is that now we have, of course, we have the C# Dev Kit right there. We also have the C# extension, which provides the base language support for C#, right, for the IntelliSense and all these nice things on C#. We also have IntelliCode for the C# Dev Kit, which adds a little bit of AI-assisted development for C#, right? So it kind of predicts a little bit a few things as you're writing code, right? And also we also have this .NET install tool, which kind of manages what version of .NET is being used by VS Code itself to provide all of these C# intelligence, right? So those are the ones that you're going to get installed right away by doing this. So now that we have that in place, the next thing that I can recommend you do here is to actually set up your workspace, right? So what you want to do is just have one folder that is going to be the entry point for VS Code to start creating all the projects, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So to do that, what you can do is just go into File, Open Folder, and in this case, I'm going to just switch into my D projects directory. There. And here I'm going to create just one folder. I'm going to call this one VS Code tutorial. All right. So VS Code tutorial, I'll click on select folder, and that's going to set up the workspace so that everything from here on is going to be focused specifically in that location, right? And in fact, for instance, if I just go, I'm going to close this. If I open my terminal, Ctrl J once again, notice that it right away starts in the VS Code tutorial directory, right? So everything is going to happen right there from here on. Right, let's close that. So how do we actually create a C# project here? So what you can do is take advantage of the command palette. So command palette is a key artifact of VS Code that you really want to get used to because it's super, super useful. Now to open the command palette, what you can do is just go into View, Command Palette, click there. That's going to open it, right? But a faster way to do it is just to the Ctrl-Shift-P combination. Ctrl-Shift-P is going to open this, and this is going to show you all sorts of commands that are contributed by multiple extensions into VS Code that is going to make your life really easy, right? And the one that I want to use here is actually the one that I have right there, which is remembering it. It will remember the latest used ones. So .NET new project. So if you want to see it, just type .NET new project. That's going to show up right there. So click on that. And that's going to go ahead and open up this kind of a wizard with a bunch of options for you to create your .NET project, right? And so in this case, let's say that we want to go ahead and create, I mean, we could create any type of application, but let's go ahead and for a web API, since that's what at least I am most used to create. So Infinite Core Web API, let's click on that. So in this case, I'm just going to name this My Web API. So nothing fancy. Hit enter. Now you want to pick what is going to be your directory. So in which directory this is going to be created. As you can see, it's defaulting to the name that I typed under the VS Code tutorial directory. So that works for me. So I'll click on that. Okay. And what you're going to see on the left side, let me just collapse the terminal for a moment. You're going to see that it pops up our brand new folder, My Web API, with all the typical files that you're going to find for a typical Web API project, right? But not only that, what you have here is what is known as the File Explorer view, right? But since we have the C# Dev Kit installed, we also get another view, which is actually down here. Notice this is the Solution Explorer. So if we collapse this and expand that other one, you're going to see that this is a kind of a virtual view of your files, but it also enables a bunch of other features that are not enabled in a normal Explorer view. Now, before we go ahead and start working with our project, one thing that I like to do is to add a little bit of color, if anything, into our views here, because I mean they are okay, but I think they could look much better, right? So one thing that you can do in VS Code is actually add things of icons so that these things look better. So if you go into the extensions view once again, there are a few icon packs that you can add here, but the one that I discovered recently, which is actually very good, is this one called Material. So just type Material over here. And this is going to show up, I think it's the very first one. So Material Icon Theme, it has 20 million downloads at the time that I'm recording this. And so I'm going to just click on install. This should be super fast, right? So I'll click on that. All right, and now that this is installed, what you're going to see is that the icons look much nicer, right? So notice these colors here. Looks much nicer both in the File Explorer view and also in the Solution Explorer, right? So it's a nice way to be able to quickly identify your files that you have in your project. And so one of the things that you expect to be able to do right away as soon as you create your project is, of course, to be able to start running it, right? By doing like an F5 experience. And so that's exactly what you can do with Visual Studio Code. So here's my project, and even before we look at the code, what we can do is just hit F5. So I'm going to hit F5 in my box. And this is going to prompt you to select what is going to be the debugger, right, for your application. In this case, of course, it's going to be C#. So I'm going to click on C#. And later, it's going to ask you what is going to be your default configuration, right? So let's not just spend too much time on this. Let's just pick the default configuration right there. And this is going to go ahead and build your project, and then it's going to kick off a debugging session of your project starting in VS Code, right? So our API is now starting. And you're going to see, yeah, all the debugging symbols loading in there. All right, and of course, this is going to open up, and let me just move this into another tab right there. Yeah, right there. Okay, so this is opening right away the Swagger page that describes the default API that comes with our Web API project, right? And so if you wanted to, we can even go ahead and expand this, click on try it out, click on execute, and that already executed our API. We can see results over here, right? Now, if you're wondering if you can debug this project in Visual Studio Code, so that's totally true. And in fact, we are in a debugging session. So what we can do now is just go back here, and let's go back into our Solution Explorer, Program CS, and let me collapse this for a moment. And this is the typical startup code for a Web API as you create with .NET. What we can do is just place a breakpoint. So I'm going to place a breakpoint over here. You're going to see that we can easily hit that breakpoint and explore what's going on there. So if I go back into our Swagger UI over here, let me go ahead and click on execute once again. And right away here in VS Code, we have our breakpoint. It has been hit, and I can go over forecast over here, for instance, and we can see the full list of weather forecast objects that have been created right there randomly in our API, right? As you can see, all the details over there. You can also see the locals on the left side. Look, notice that we have variables, we have the summaries, we have the forecast. We could even add a watch. So I can right click on forecast and I can say add to watch, and that's going to show the watch right there on the left side, right? So there is first class support for debugging in your C# application. Any sort of C# application, you will be able to start debugging it just normally as in any other IDE like Visual Studio, for instance. Now, since this is a Web API project, one thing that I like is to not be opening the browser every single time that I'm going to debug it, right? Because that just serves no purpose. I mean, it's nice to have this this way of documenting our API, but this is not the main way that you want to be testing your APIs all the time, right? So let me go back here. Let me just remove the breakpoint and finish this and stop this. So one thing that you can do to not have to open the browser every single time is to just make a small change into this file under your API properties, launch settings.json over here. What you can do is just go into your HTTP profile, right? So this is the profile over here, and just switch this setting here, launch browser, change it from true into false, right? And just by doing that, if I just hit F5 once again, what you're going to notice is that the browser is not going to open anymore. So the debugging session starts, but it's not going to open anymore, right? So which is great. But if that is the case, well, what is going to be the right way to start testing or debugging my API, right? So what would be that? So if you notice, let me open up here and let me collapse this over here. There is a file that comes by default. I think it's starting with .NET 8, which is the HTTP file, right? Which is right here. this HTTP file. So if you click on that one, what you're going to see is that there is already a few sentences here that allow you to go ahead and directly from VS Code, you can hit your API so to exercise it and see what kind of results you can get from it. Now, unfortunately, by default in VS Code, you're not going to see you're going to have any kind of a coloring or a way to actually execute these lines that you can see here, right? So for that, what you want to do is just to install one more extension that will enable that functionality over here. So just go back into the extensions pane over here and look for REST, right? And this is going to pop up. The very first one that you should see here is this one called REST Client by Wachao Mao, right? So this is one that I've been using for a lot of time and it works pretty well. So I'm going to click on install on this one and it should start really quick. So yeah, it is installed now. So close that. And let's go back into the file explorer, into the Solution Explorer. Let's open web API.http and notice that this time we do have coloring, right? And not just that, we also have the ability to click this kind of a link over there to execute a request, right? So notice that this is the actual address of my API, localhost 5084, and this is the weather forecast endpoint that we can look at very quickly in Program CS. Notice that that is the endpoint that is right here, right? So what I want to do is just execute that directly within Visual Studio Code. So if I go back here, what I can do is just, well, go ahead and click on send request right there. And that immediately goes ahead and queries the API, and you can see the results right there in Visual Studio Code. So there's no need to get out into a browser and then switch screens, no need for that. So it's right here. And if you wanted to, I mean, we can re-enable that breakpoint, right? So I can go back into my breakpoint. Let me put that over here so we can see better, close that. I'm going to put my breakpoint over here, right? And so if I go back into my web API and let me collapse this, I click on send request, you're going to see that the breakpoint is hit just like before, right? But there's no browser this time, it's right there. And then I click play and then I get my results on the right side, right there, all right? So that's how I usually do any sort of web API development in my box. There's no need to get it out of this. Right, and so okay, now I'm going to stop this debugging session and I'm going to close a few screens over here. Now the next thing is that you probably don't want to be debugging your application every single time, right? Sometimes you just want to run it and start exercising it to see how it works. So you don't have to be debugging all the time. And so another way to run your application is by just using directly the .NET CLI, which is one of my favorite ways to do this. So to do that, let me show you this. So let me collapse this and let me just do Control J once again to open the terminal. Let's go into the terminal tab over here. So terminal, right now the debug console. And I'm going to just delete one of these. There's going to be a delete button right here, delete button. So I'm going to delete that to just go back directly to this terminal window. And what I'm going to do is just go into my web API directory, right? So that's the directory of my API. And really all you have to do to build your application directly in the terminal is just type .NET build, right? So that's going to go ahead and build your application. And if you want to run it, right, you can go ahead and just type .NET run. So that's going to go ahead again, once again, build it and then run your application directly in the terminal, right? No need for a debugger. And then once you are here, what you can do is, of course, you can, again, go back to your HTTP file and you can click on send request and that's going to show up the results right there in the right side, right? So that's another faster way to start testing your API. Now, how about the coding experience, right? That's the main thing about VS Code. So how is that code experience working for you as a C# developer? So to show you that, what I want to do is the following. So if you go to Program CS, right? So you may have seen this or not, but really this API is all it is a simple endpoint that all it does is that it creates kind of a range of 5 elements from 1 to 5. And then for each element, it prepares an instance of these weather forecast objects that's going to have a date, a temperature in centigrades, a summary, and then a conversion into temperature in Fahrenheit, right? And so it's going to create an array of those with a bunch of random values, right? And then that just gets returned back into the client. So that's how it works. So what we want to do here, just to see how the coding experience works, is to add just one more element into this weather forecast, which is going to be the season, right? So, you know, winter or summer or one of these seasons according to the date that has been predicted for that forecast, right? So how can we add that season and calculate the right season in there, right? So for that, what I like to do, instead of just adding code here, what I like to do, and also to show you how things work in VS Code, is to create a class library, right? So how can we create a class library to put that other logic? I'm actually going to remove this breakpoint over here. So One way to do that would be to just go to Explorer, of course, and then as you would expect, you can right click on your solution, you can say new project, and that's going to open up this, and you can go ahead and click, for instance, on class library. That's what we want to create there. So that's one way to do it, but I want to show you also another way to do it because I think it's very useful in many cases, right? Which is using the CLI itself. So if you go over here, and let me just Control C. So Control C is going to stop our application, right? And then I'm going to go up one directory, right? And so you can use the .NET CLI, of course, to create your projects. And you can just do .NET new. If you do --list, or actually is .NET new list, I think is the right way to do it these days. Yeah, I'm going to show you the templates for many different types of applications that you can create, right? And I think it's important to know that you can do this because when you create things by using the Solution Explorer, by just doing new, right here, new project, I mean, this is handy, but it's not going to offer you many options that you may want to specify for a different, for your project. For instance, if you wanted to create a .NET new web API, right? We can do here help, and you're going to discover there are many flags that you can use for the creation of your API, right? So for instance, what if you want to use controllers as opposed to minimal APIs, right? So the default these days is minimal APIs, but maybe you want to use controllers. So for that, you could use this flag here, -controllers or --use controllers, so that the API is created by default with controllers, right? What if you don't want to use an open API, Swagger? You can use this flag over here. What if, let's say, you want to specify a specific framework, right? What if you want to use .NET 6 or .NET 7? You can use that flag, or this other flag to not use HTTPS. So there are many flags in there that are not available in the UI all the time, but they are all available in the CLI, right? So just keep that in mind when you create your projects. This is another way and very handy in many situations. Now, what we want to create now is a class library, right? So I'm going to just do .NET new class lib, and we're going to name it just my library, right? So my library, right? So I'll hit enter, right? So that went ahead and created our library. So if you go back into Explorer, the thing is that you're not going to see that show up in the Solution Explorer because we didn't create it via that. Remember, the Solution Explorer is kind of a virtual view of things, right? And so, but if you go into VS Code tutorial, into the File Explorer, we're going to see that the my library is right here. How do we bring that my library into a Solution Explorer? Well, all you have to do is just right click in the solution, add existing project, and then we select my library CSprog, select project, and then my library is going to show up right here, right? Just along as you would expect next to this other project. What we want to do now is to create this class that we talked about that's going to be able to tell us what season is for the specific date that has been specified in the weather forecast. So we have this class one.cs over here. We were going to actually, let's actually get rid of it. So let's get rid of it and let's just right click on my library, add new file. All right, so it's going to be a class and the name of this is going to be weather calculator, right? So it's weather calculator. Okay, so this is the class that is what we're going to add just one function to calculate or to determine what's going to be the season. So for that, first thing is going to be that this is going to be a static class. So it's going to be a static class, and then this is going to have just one method, public static string. Okay, and so the method is going to be named determine season, and then it's going to receive a date only object. We're going to name it date. And then, okay, so how do we determine the season? Well, first, let's go ahead and capture the month, right? What month it is, so date.month, right? And then, well, what we likely want to do is to try to start playing with the month number, right? So if, let's say month is greater than or equals to 3, and also month is less than or equals to 5, right? All right, so at least in my side of the world, that would be spring, right? That would be spring. And so, yeah, as you can see, I mean, there's all sorts of IntelliSense all over the place, right? So that works just as great as it would work anywhere else, right? So the first class support for IntelliSense in VS Code. But of course, I mean, this is going to get a little bit tedious, right? Because I'll have to go ahead and say, okay, so now if month is from 6 to something else, then it's another season and so on. So that I don't like a lot. And so for that, what I really recommend you to do is to take advantage of GitHub Copilot, right? Now, that is a paid subscription service, right? I understand that some people may not want to install it, but I really urge you to try it out. There's even a free trial because GitHub Copilot massively improves the experience you're going to get in VS Code as you write your code. And today, I cannot really work anymore without using GitHub Copilot. So let me show you how that's going to help us here. So what you want to do after you have gotten either the trial or you are subscribed to GitHub Copilot, and you can find a page for that very quickly. That's very easy. What you want to do is just come here and just look for Copilot, right? And so you're going to see two extensions. It's going to be GitHub Copilot and GitHub Copilot Chat. You can just go ahead and install. I think either of them are going to install both of them. So as you can see, yeah, both of them just got installed. It's right there. All right, so it's installed. So let's close this and let's go back here, there. Okay, and so you're going to notice that now we have this little icon down there. So that means that GitHub Copilot is up and running and ready to help us with our code. So how is that going to help us here? So let me show you this. Scroll down a bit. And so, yeah, we know that if month is in that range, that will be spring. But what about the other seasons? So let's go down here. And notice that Copilot already knows that from 6 to 8 should be summer. So I'm just going to hit tab and accept that suggestion, right? So that was all powered by Copilot. If I keep going down, it should likely be able to get the rest of what I need, right? So just by doing this, my code is pretty much complete. It's not perfect, I mean, it's not ideal, but it suffices what I wanted to do, right? So with this method is able to predict whatever season corresponds to that date, right? So that's how useful Copilot can be. But there's more, right? It's not just that. What we can do is the following. So I can go ahead and, because you know what, having all this if else, I mean, if that is kind of not a great idea. I mean, that could get buggy a little bit, and it's just too long. It doesn't make sense. There's much better ways to do this. So in fact, I'm going to go ahead and select all of this, right? And I'm going to go ahead and open up and select this. You see this light bulb? You're going to see that opening up in many places in your code, in VS Code, right? Especially when you have Copilot also. So I'm going to click on that. And what I want to do is select this option that says rewrite, modify using Copilot, right? And what you can see is that this opens up this little dialog over there, which is you can use to ask Copilot to help you with the piece of code that you have selected. So in this case, what I want to do is actually use a switch expression, a C# switch expression, as opposed to all of these if that I have over there. So use switch expression, right? Enter. And so Copilot should be able to now explore my code and suggest how I could rewrite this code. And as you can see on the right side, the switch expression is right there, right? So string season equals month, switch 3 or 4 or 5 is spring, 6 or 6 is summer, and so on, so on, so. Right? And so, which makes sense. I mean, I'll click on accept. And as you can see, now all of that code has been condensed in this one switch expression, which is much better, much nicer, less error prone, small method, really like it. And so all powered by GitHub Copilot without me having to do anything other than prompting it for what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, so that's that with that method. And of course, now we want to use this weather calculator in our API. So let's see how we can do that. So let's go back into the API. And then let's go into program.cs, right? And one thing that of course we have to do is to add a project reference from the API into the library so that we can use the types in the library in the API, right? So let's right click on my web API. I'll say add project reference into my library. Okay, so that will give us access to that in program.cs. And now what we can do is the following, right? First thing is in weather forecast, we want to add our brand new season property. So this is a record type. All we have to do is just say string season, right? So that's going to be the season. And now we want to go back here and take advantage of our weather calculator. So I'm going to just add here weather calculator dot determine season. Right? And notice that Copilot is also suggesting how I should pass in the date into the method. I'm going to hit tab to accept the suggestion. And as you can see, it just takes datetime now, adds days as we're doing over here, right? And then it will translate that into a date only object that's going to be sent into the determine season. And so, yeah, that pretty much should do it. But that being said, I don't like I don't like the way that, I mean, we are calculating the time over here and then we are calculating it again over here. I mean, that's not accurate. That's not, it's not good. And so let's see if we can improve this a little bit by just selecting the code here. And then once again, notice the label over there. So you can click on that. And what we can choose here in this case is this one called extract method down here. Extract method should be able to take that out into another method right over here. And then what will be the name? What will be the name for this method? What you can do is just hit F2. F2. That's going to open this rename symbol dialog. And so the name will be, let's say, calculate date. Enter. All right. Now this method, it cannot just go into this location because we have this record type over here and we are in the program CS. So I'm just going to move it over there. So now we have that method over there, and what we can see is that, well, the name has been already used for this. And notice that this date only is no longer is not needed really, that casting there. So I'm going to just remove that. And just like we're using calculate date over there, we can also go ahead and use it over here, right? So now at least that logic is encapsulated into another method. I think we can do a little bit even better because we're still calculating the date twice, right? So the now that we're using there is not exactly the same one. So how can we improve this? Well, what we can do is just open and close a section over here. Let me grab this over there. So we're going to be returning weather forecast over there, and this needs that. And then let's move this over there. Okay. And now that we have things in this shape, what we can do is the following. So instead of calculating the date twice, well, we can just go ahead and say var date equals calculate date with the index. And now we can just grab this actual date and replace that over here and over there. Just small improvement so that the code looks a little bit better. Okay. So notice that some of these castings are no longer required. I mean, for instance, over here, notice that this is grayed out because it's not needed. This is also not needed. So VS Code will help you with the help of the C#.kit and the C# extension to notice these things are not really needed. So you can clean up things on the go by doing things like this. And I'm also going to remove this like that. And so now we have our method pretty much ready. So that should now include the season. Right, so let's go ahead and test this out. So I'm going to just go ahead and go into my web API. I'll just do .NET run in my terminal. All right. Okay, so it is running. Let's go back into our HTTP file over here. Let's hit send request. And as expected, as you can see, now we have the season, right? So yeah, so pretty much for the date that I am in December at the time that I'm recording this, it is winter over here, and that's going to be the season that has been predicted for every single case, right? Now, this is good, but I mean, I'd like to know if this is actually going to work beyond winter, right? What about summer? What about spring? Is that going to work or not? And so instead of keep playing around with dates directly in our production code, what we can do is to add a test project, right? A unit test project. So how can we do that in VS Code? So that's fully supported. And so let me show you how that works. So let me go back into my terminal, Control-C to stop it. So I just stopped it, and I'm going to close all this. So what we can do is just right click on the solution, say new project, and then what you want to do is just choose an, in this case, a big fan of XUnit, so I'm going to pick XUnit test project. You could also use a MS test or NUnit. I'm going to go for XUnit, all right? And so I'm going to say my tests, all right? Pick the default directory, and then test project appears right here, okay? And so we have our unit test 1 class over there, but we're going to rename that because we're going to be testing weather calculator, right? So I'll do F2 on top of unit test 1, and this is going to be weather calculator tests. Hit enter, okay? And then the class has been renamed. We'll have to also name this the same way. Weather calculator tests, right? And so the first thing that you should do here is also get a reference from your test project into your, in this case, the class library. So right click in my tests, add project reference, my library. Now the tests have access to the weather calculator class, right? And so of course, now it is time to write these tests, right? And so you can totally write them manually, but that is something that I actually stopped doing a while ago because this is another thing where Copilot can significantly help you, right? And so you don't need a full complete suite of unit tests, but you can get a good head start by using AI. So let me show you how it works. So what I want to do is go into weather calculator now, right? So here we are back in weather calculator. What I want to do is just select the piece of code that I want to test. And now what you can do is just click on these three dots right here, in my case, because my screen is a bit small, and then look for the chat icon. And so this is GitHub Copilot chat. So here you can ask Copilot to start helping you with things. And one of those things is going to be tests. So you can just type here tests, right? So tests, and then just to be a bit more clear, I do want X unit test, right? So I'm just going to put here X unit, and then I'll hit enter, and let's see what Copilot comes with. All right, and so let's see what it generated. So as you can see, we do have kind of an initial suite of tests, handy tests, right? So it's created pretty much one for each possible combination of, I guess, numbers. Let me see. Yeah, so different dates for spring, and then it created another unit test for summer, for autumn, for winter, and even for a leap year, which is not too bad. And it actually used XUnit, which is what I like. But I'm thinking that we could do this actually by using an XUnit theory, right? Data-driven unit test, as opposed to this kind of testing, because it's just too much testing. So let's see if we can ask for that, right? So can we use a theory instead? Let's see what we get. All right. And so as you can see, now we have a much better test. I guess it has a lot of inline data, but now it's just one test that can get coverage for the entire set of months across the year, right? So I'm liking that, and it also kept the leap year situation over there. So I like that. So let's go ahead and copy this. I'm going to copy this weather calculator test. So let me just copy this entire class. Copy. Let's go into my actual class. Let's put it there. Okay. And so I may need a reference over here. So let me to add missing usings or missing dependencies. What you can do is just click either do the light bulb that's over here. You can click on that and do using my library. Or the one thing that I like to do all over the place is just use Control dot. That's a great shortcut. So Control dot, that's going to open up this dialog for quick fixes. I'll click on using my library, and that's going to bring in the missing dependency, right, on the top. And so, yeah, so now we have our unit tests, and we probably want to just run them, right? So how do we run this? The first thing I want to do before you can run this, and this is because test cases are not going to be discovered automatically. You do have to at least build your test project before you can run them. So I'm going to go ahead and just right click under my tests. So right click, build, right? And that's going to help VS Code discover the test cases that we have available there. So now we can go, what we can do is go into the three dots, and there's going to be this testing view right there, testing. So let's click on that one. And this is going to show kind of a hierarchy of the tests that have been discovered in your workspace, right? And what you can do, and you can see all the combinations right there, right? What you can do is just click either over here, you can click on there, or you can click on there, or you can right click any of these, and that's going to allow you to go ahead and start running your test. So I'm just going to click on this, and that will go ahead and run our unit test and see how we go. So as you can see, all test cases have passed, right? So we have some confidence that we have some initial coverage, at least for our test. Like I said, it doesn't have to be exact, it doesn't have to be super accurate, but I think it is a great start on the test, right? And from there you can start asking for more, right? So I don't like the way that this has been laid out. You can ask for the AAA, right? So arrange, act, assert, and you can ask for a few other reasons, a few things, but I think it's a pretty good start. And so one last thing that I want to show you, and just because some people complained about this in the past, is the fact that can I have some of these tabs moved into another screen, right? Can I pop out some of these and move into another screen? And you can totally do that actually today, right? So let me show you this. I mean, it's a bit hard to show in just one screen, but let me show you that you can just select this, and I'm going to drag this outside of VS Code, right? So now this is actually in another of my screens, and I'm going to bring it back. But notice that this guy is now floating, right? It is floating on top of this, of the main window, right? So you can now take this, just take it into another monitor, right? If you have one more, and now you can have this multi-view of your code, and you can even put more things in other screens, right? So that you can nicely see and work on different pieces of code, as you would do in the past in Visual Studio. You can also do that over here, right? And so yeah, but here it is, a floating window. So yeah, that's what I wanted to show you today. I hope that was useful, and well, I see you in the next video.